Hey, what's going on, everybody? So today we're going to be, next few days we're going to be working on this Hyundai Elantra 2015. And the first issue with it was, this is my daughter's car. She ended up running it low on oil and blew the motor. So at that time it was running good before the motor blew. So she took it to the dealership and got the motor replaced. And as soon as they put the motor in, the dealer said, oh, the transmission is shot. And then they wanted to charge her another $2,000 to $3,000 to replace the transmission. So what we're gonna do is go over a few things, check it out. I've already driven it, but I'm gonna go for a drive with you guys so you can hear what is going on with it. But it's just kind of odd that a transmission would be running fine and then you get a motor replaced and all of a sudden the transmission shot. I guess it could happen. I see something else going wrong with the install of the engine and they messed something up, but who will know? Not us. But anyway, we'll go through a little test drive. But now there is a light on, and it's the ABS, and then you got the traction control light that is on now. So I don't know if it has something to do with the ABS system that is causing this issue with the transmission, but we're gonna go through and try and diagnostic, and hopefully we can save her a couple $1,000s. So let's go for a drive so you can see what hear what I'm talking about. All right, so we're inside her car. And yes, the temp is cold. But I'm gonna take you for a little drive and you can hear exactly what's going on. But see those lights right there, the ABS and the swirly car. So what we're gonna do is take you for a drive so you can hear it. And obviously in reverse, seems like it's doing just fine. Sounds like she needs brakes. So that could be the cause of the ABS. But that still doesn't explain this transmission deal. So I'll let you listen. So, and it'll shift into gear. And it's just when I give it some gas. And as you can see, it's not making any noise until I give it a little bit of gas. So I am not sure what that is. So since I know that the ABS light's on and everything, wonder if it has something to do with that. But it goes away when I don't give it any gas. So it shifts just fine. It's just making that noise every time I give it a little bit of throttle. I let off and you can hear it, it goes away. Alright, so all I did was pop the hood, lifted the car up. I don't have the jack stands and jack. It'll be here a little bit later today, so just to get a little head start, jacked it up, putting the tire underneath the car so just in case that jack does fail. And then what I'll end up doing is taking off this cover and getting underneath and taking off this other plastic cover right here. So it's not too bad, just a bunch of Phillips right there. See it? There's a couple bolts on there. I'll let you know what size they are, but there's one right there. I'm pretty sure it's a 10. And then I'll end up taking this plastic piece off so that way I can have a better visual of the transmission. So I'm gonna take those off and go from there. All right, so every bolt that's on this plastic piece to take off is a 10 mil. So I already got these two off. So all I'm doing is, as soon as I take the bolts off, if I can, which I'm going to, I'm going to put the bolts back in. So this way, you just don't have a bunch of random bolts everywhere. You won't lose them, and then you'll know exactly where they go. Because they're put back where they came from. And then with all the bolts from underneath here in the car, you can see I got the bottom plastic shield off. You can see the transmission and engine. I just ended up putting all the bolts on top of that cover, and this will just stay here until I'm done with the transmission or whatever we got going on. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, there's this cover right here that is actually attached to the motor and the transmission, or just the motor, and all it's going to do is allow me to get to the plate so I can see if the flywheel is 100% bolted up before I go too far with disassembling. Alright, so I just got one bolt left holding this cover on, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. Alright, so now that I got it off, right here you can see this is the cover, and this is where you actually have access to your flywheel bolts. So before you take your transmission off, you got 4 bolts. So you'll take these 2 nuts off, and then you'll be able to get to it. Alright, so that I have that cover off now, like I said before, just make sure you put your bolts back in. You don't have a bunch just lying around. And now you know exactly where these go. You can't mess it up. So just put them back. And now the next step is, I'm going to take off this little plastic cover so that way I can see how the flywheel is. And with these bolts, it was a 12 millimeter. So I'm going to see if these are 12 as well. Alright, looks like those are going to be a 14. It might just be this side. Alright, looks like it's just going to be that one 14 millimeter bolt for this cover. And take that cover off. And this bolt also bolts right directly to the transmission too, so I'm just going to put that back in, and now you can see we have access to the flywheel. Let's see if we can get you in there. Alright, so here's your flywheel, and right here, that's where one bolt's going to be, but I can't really get to it. I'm going to have to spin it over, but what we'll end up doing is waiting until I get the other jack so I can get this car lifted up a little higher. But there's one of the 4 bolts that we'll have to take apart or take off so we can get this transmission off, and there's going to be 4 of them. Alright, so now what I'm going to end up doing while I'm waiting on those jack stands and jack, so that way I can put a block on the jack, hold up the motor, and slide the transmission out, I'm going to end up taking off the air box, removing the battery and everything. So that way I have clear access to the top of the transmission. Alright, so now I'm just going to start taking off the air box. Just slowly start dismantling a few things. And it's pretty easy. You just got a couple clips, take out your air filter, and then right back up in here. Might be a little bit more difficult, so what we'll do is we'll take off, you just pull off the engine cover. Pretty simple. It's just got little ball tabs on it, just pull up, and then that will give you access to this bottom nut. So you can loosen that up and you can get that out of the way. So now get, looks like we'll need a 10mm bolt again. So we'll get that 10 mil so we can get the bottom of the air cleaning box out. Got that one, and there's one clear down there and one right here. So we need a bigger extension. Alright, so I'm gonna have to use an extension on this. Alright, so here's the bottom of the air cleaning box. So there's one bolt that I already took out. And you got one that's right there. And the other one is right down there. Alright, so now that we got that air cleaning box out, you can see the top of the transmission and everything. Now we need to work on this battery in the box. So right here, it's a 12mm I already have loosened up. And what that will do is allow you to take off this little bracket that holds the battery in place. And all I'm gonna do is just screw this back on. Then my next step is I need to take off the terminals. So I'm gonna take that one off, open up this box, and then I need to take this nut off. And then that'll allow it to loosen up, and then I can take this whole terminal off. And then we won't have any power to anything, and we won't risk blowing any fuses. And looks like we are a 10mm again. All right, so now that we have the battery pulled out, so next step to do would be to take off these bolts, and they're 12mm. That's a 12. And then this guy is a 10, and that's a 10 as well. So we'll take those off. All right, so I got this bottom plate out, and what I did is I ended up screwing all the bolts where they could, so that way I know there's no bolts missing. And then right here, these two bolts are the ones that go through right there, and same with this guy, and then right back here. So that'd be that bolt, that one, and those two. So I'm just threading every bolt back in. And then for your ECU, I had to disconnect 2 bolts as well. And it was that one right there, which you can see I put it back in. And then that one right there. Took it out and put it back in. This ECU is set up just like this. I just undid that so that way I can move this off to the side, and then it allowed access to this bolt. And now you just got everything hanging, and you have full access to the top of your transmission. So there's a transmission mount right there. There's one underneath the car in the back, down there. As you can see, it's not going to be too bad to tear this out. So now the next step will be kind of on a standstill until I get those stands, but I guess I can start taking apart this front end. So what I'll need to do over here is I'm going to end up knocking out the lower ball joint right there and take that out. So that way I can swing this whole hub assembly out. So that way that CV axle, I can pull it out of the transmission. And then I'll have to do the same thing to the other side. Alright, so how I'm gonna take out the CV axle, which is right there, I'm gonna take off the lower ball joint. And that is gonna be a 19mm. So I'm gonna get a wrench on that, loosen that up, and then I'm going to hit the side of the knuckle right there, and it should pop it loose, and then that'll allow me to move the whole assembly out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it loose and go from there. Alright, so I got that bottom bolt off. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap on this knuckle, and hopefully it'll knock it loose. to go. Alright, so now you can see that I have this whole thing loose, and what that'll allow me to do is be able to pull out this CV axle from the transmission. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a nut and loosen this up so that way I can take the CV axle completely out. So the next step will be just taking the CV axle out of the tranny. I'm going to wait to do that for a minute. So I'm going to come up here and then just start taking off some miscellaneous stuff. So right here, this is your shift linkage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly start taking this off. There's a bolt right there and one right here. And then I'll disconnect this little connector right here, and I should be able to take that whole thing off. And I'm just going to slowly start unbolting some random items right there that holds on these hoses, and disconnect this ground on both sides. And I'm going to get this out of the way. So I'll just move it out of the way, and then I'll have good access to everything up there that I can take apart as well. So you got those two big bolts I can take off. You got that little one in the back. So, and there's just random things that I'm going to start doing. Alright, so now that I have all the wires and everything disconnected from the transmission, everything's disconnected besides these two lines, which won't be hard to disconnect. Everything else is off. All I gotta do is undo this little clamp. That's for the breather for the transmission. And now what I'm gonna do is, since I'm still waiting on jacks, I'm gonna loosen up the transmission bolts. And they're 14 millimeter. You can see you got those two directly on the top, and you got that one right there, and then you just follow it all the way around. So you're gonna have, let me see if I can get up to it. Okay, so you have that one that already loosened up, and you got this one, you got that one right there. And then from the other side, that's the one I was showing you from the top of the motor. So they're just separated a little bit. And then you come around right here, and you got that bolt right there. And you come up, you have another one right there. That one will be easier to get to. As soon as I get the car jacked up, I can take this CV axle out. Then it'll give me all that room. Alright, so we made it back with the new transmission. Only got 3,000 miles on it. Not too bad. Picked her up for 200 bucks. A lot cheaper than anything else. So now what we're going to do is take off this side. I already got the lower ball joint off. So you can see that it's off. And then now I'm gonna undo this nut right here for the CV axle, so that way I can pull the CV axles out of the transmission. Alright, so with the transmission unbolted. You can see I started lowering it. That's where the starter goes. Dropped it a little bit. Yep, that's ghetto, but that's all I had. That's just holding just a little bit of pressure on that motor. Motor still has a motor mount on it. The jack is the only thing that's holding up that tranny. So I'm going to continue lowering it. I'm going to drop it slowly. Just walk it off of that jack. And get off that wheel. There's the transmission.
And there you go.
And the new one's in the box. All right, so you can see when you get down in here, you're gonna have these little guides. There's one right here, and there's another one right over here. The transmission sits on these little posts to keep it centered. So make sure you don't jack those up when you're taking out the tranny or putting the new one in. Okay, so since this only has 3,000 miles on it, where the CVs go in, these seals are pretty good. But if you get one that's got maybe 50, 60,000 miles on it, you may have a problem like this. And you can see right here, this is where the CV comes into, and this is the seal. This is cracked. This would need to be replaced before you put your CV axle in, because if not, it's going to cause a lot of damage in the future. So make sure your seals are good to go. And this has a new motor in it, so I don't need to do the rear main seal. However, if you got 60, 70,000 miles on your car, you're already right here. I mean, you want to bring it on in here. So you got 7 bolts right there holding on the flywheel. All you got to do is take off those 7 bolts, and that flywheel, well, little plate, it'll come off, and you can replace your rear main seal. So do that stuff while you have the transmission out, because usually rear main seals will leak between 100, 200,000 miles depending on what vehicle you have. How often you do oil changes, what kind of oil you use. So if you got the transmission or motor out, just replace your seals. All right, Brian, let's get this pushed in. And we were using cardboard to put it on so that way it doesn't damage the bottom of the transmission. So make sure you don't just drag it on the ground without something underneath it. I can move this. That'll give us quite a bit of room. All right, we're gonna go straight in from here. Ready? Don't push on any hoses, okay? Okay, what I need you to do, I need to get on the other side and push that in. We got to rotate it now. Okay? All right. Just got to rotate it like that. Why is that not moving that way?
The tire,
It's hitting the tire?
the cardboard is stuck on the tire.
Alright, that's fine. So with that, now we gotta lift it up just a little bit, okay? So like what I'm doing right there. Easy. Okay. Yep, keep going. Alright, hold on. Now I'm gonna guide it from the top. Alright, bud, let's go ahead. Yeah, looking good. Looking good, keep coming. Looking good. Just a little more. Keep going, keep going. Whoa. All right, so what we ended up doing was we got the 2 top bolts in for the top of that bell housing, and then I got 2 on the bottom. So now that I got those 2 snugged up, I need to get this motor off of a jack stand, or off of the jack, and same with this tranny. So now I'm putting in this transmission mount. So as soon as I tighten these 3 bolts, and I'm gonna jack this up a little bit, and then I'm gonna run the 2 bars through on the inside of the fender. You can see where my fingers are. They come in right through here, pass through this rubber bushing, and they screw in right here. So I'm gonna hurry and finish up tightening these 3 bolts, and then we'll jack it up and secure this top mount on. And that'll free up everything underneath the car so I can climb under there and finish putting the rest of the bolts in. Brian, come right here real quick. So these are the bolts I'm talking about. This is part of your transmission mount, and they just slide through right here. All the way through. Up on top, you can see the tips of them right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw those in, and then that'll allow me to get rid of all these jack stands. Alright, so now that we got those bolts in, you can see them protruding out right here. This motor and transmission isn't going anywhere now. So we got the 4 bolts hooked on from the bell housing of the transmission to the motor. Then we got the transmission mount, and this other side still has a motor mount. So now I can go ahead and get rid of the support underneath the motor, and then I can put on this mount. This actually goes right underneath the tranny. It bolts up to the transmission, and this goes to the back part of the subframe, and this acts as another mount as well. Alright, so this other mount that I was talking about, so this is the transmission. That's where your CV axle goes. And this is the plate that we need to still hook up to the torque converter. And then here's our mount. So that hooks up to the bottom of the transmission. As you can see, there's a bolt there, and you got that one right there. And then up a little bit, you got that one. And then it goes to the subframe, which is right here. And you'll see that there's a bolt right there on that side, and then one on that side. So now that we have all the supports done, now what I'm going to do is finish putting all these bolts in from the engine to the bell housing of the transmission. I'm going to get that all hooked up, and then when I get done with that, I'm going to go ahead and start putting in these bolts that go to the flywheel up to the torque converter. So we'll go from there. Alright guys, so I left the air box out of it. So that way, get some light up on here. There we go. So I left the air box out of it, so that way I can fill up the fluid. That right there is your fill port, and then underneath there's going to be a side. That is your fill line, so you need to take that off, and then fill it right through on that guy right there. You'll unscrew that. But other than that, the install wasn't too bad. Putting the bolts back on to the bell housing, to the motor, wasn't that bad at all either. So now what we'll do, I didn't film putting the CVs in, putting the lower ball joints. So I did the video on it, showing how to disassemble it. So putting the ball joints back on and the CV axles in, it's pretty self-explanatory. In and out, you can't mess it up. Other than that, I got everything put in besides the air box. So now let's go for a drive. So I think all in total, it might be 6 hours taking the transmission out, putting another one in. So let's go take a drive and see how it is. All right, so right now it is idling. I'm gonna have my boy film this. But as you can see, the ABS light, traction light's on, so I know that's due to needing some brakes. But what we're gonna do is go for a little drive. You can see it's in drive, and now it drives normal. So you don't hear that whining noise like you did on the first test run. But yes, the brakes do need to be changed out. But as far as the transmission, that transmission is holding up nice. And it was probably a total of 6 hours from taking everything out, putting the new stuff in. The reason why it took longer is because I had to go to Ogden, then I had to go to North Salt Lake to pick up this transmission. But you can see, getting on it, everything's perfect. It's shifting good. I don't hear anything. I think I'm gonna have one happy daughter now. Saved her damn near $2,000 from the quote that I just got. Maybe a little more than $2,000 I saved her. So just remember, guys, if you ever need to do something, let me flip this camera around. You can't see me. We'll wait till we get back to the house. All right, guys, so that's gonna be it for this transmission repair. So what we ended up doing was buying a new transmission and taking the old one out. And all it does is just take a little bit of time. I mean, we didn't have the money to go and drop $2,500 to $3,000 on a transmission. And just for a rebuilt one, I got quoted $1,600 to $2,600 just to have the transmission rebuilt. That's not for somebody to tear it out and put a new one in. So I ended up getting this transmission for $200, and then we bought some fluid, and that's all it's gonna cost my daughter. So she's overall maybe 300 bucks into this. And she got herself a new transmission with 3,000 miles on it. So you can't beat that. Thank you guys for watching, appreciate it. Like, comment, most definitely comment on it. Tell them bye, bud. Thank you guys for watching, appreciate it.